1884. Jake Mercer had been coming to the Calloway house since he was 12 years old. He knew which step on the porch creaked. He knew that Rose Calloway kept the coffee strong and the opinions stronger. He knew that the back door was always unlocked, and that if he knocked on the front door like a guest, Tom would never let him forget it.
He knew the house the way you know a place you've been 100 times, without looking, without thinking, the way your feet know the path even in the dark. Robert Calloway had died 4 years ago. Fever, quick and cruel. Since then, Rose had run the property alone. The garden, the accounts, the fence lines, all of it, with the particular stubbornness of a woman who has decided that staying upright is a matter of principle.
Jake had kept coming by. It seemed wrong to stop. What he did not know, what he had not known until a Tuesday morning in September when he came around the side of the house and found Rose in the yard attempting to split firewood.
You want some help with that?
Was that knowing a place and truly seeing it were
sure?
two entirely different things. She swung the axe. It glanced off the log. She repositioned, swung again. This time, the axe stuck without splitting. She put one boot on the log and pulled the axe free with the grim efficiency of a woman who has been doing this alone for 4 years and has gotten used to it.
Jake Mercer stood at the corner of the house with his hat in his hands and understood, with the specific and unwelcome clarity of a young man receiving information he did not ask for, that he was in considerable trouble.
He counted 3 good reasons to walk away. Then, he put his hat back on and walked across the yard. "Mrs. Calloway, let me do that." Rose looked up at him with those blue eyes and said, "I've been doing it myself for 4 years, Jake." And he said, "I know. Let me do it anyway." She handed him the axe. And that was how it started. Jake had met Tom Calloway on the first day of school when they were both 12 years old, and Tom had defended him in an argument about something neither of them could remember now, and they had been inseparable ever since. The Calloway house had become Jake's second home within the first month. Rose fed him. Robert, Tom's father, a quiet, steady man who built furniture and kept his word, had taught him to read a fence line and respect a tool. The mill where Tom worked had been running double shifts since the Oregon Trail settlers kept coming through. Half the county was new. The Calloway house was one of the original 4 families. It had a settledness to it, a realness that the newer houses didn't have yet. Jake had grown up at that kitchen table. Rose had been the one who told him when his manners needed work, who pushed books across the table and said, "Read this, it'll do you good," who asked him real questions and actually waited for the answers. She was not soft about it. Rose Calloway was not a soft woman. But she was consistent. And consistency had been the thing Jake Mercer had needed most at 12 years old.
Robert died 4 years ago. Tom had been 18. Jake had been there the week after and the week after that, and had never really stopped coming because it seemed wrong to stop. He had watched Rose manage the loss the way she managed everything, without falling apart, without asking for more help than she absolutely needed, with the stubbornness of a woman who has decided that staying upright is a matter of principle.
He admired it. He had always admired it. That was not new. What was new, what had arrived on the Tuesday morning with the axe and the log and the blue eyes, was something else entirely. He spent the week after trying to convince himself it was nothing. He failed. He failed specifically on Thursday when he brought back a saw he had borrowed from Tom, and Rose answered the door in her work dress with flour on her hands and said, "Tom's not here. He's at the mill." And he said, "I know. I just came to return the saw." And she looked at him for a moment and said, "Well, come in then. I've just made coffee." And he went in and sat at the kitchen table where he had sat 100 times, and understood that sitting at this table was never going to feel the same again. The problem with Tom was that he was Jake's best friend. Not in the casual sense, in the sense of 10 years of shared history, of knowing each other's worst and choosing to stay anyway. They had the kind of friendship that didn't need to be maintained because it was built of something more durable than effort. Which meant Jake could not tell him. He had told Tom everything for 10 years. Every mistake and every good decision and every moment of doubt. Tom had listened to all of it and offered opinions that were sometimes right and sometimes wrong, and always honest. He could not tell him this. He tried in October, sitting on the fence at the south end of Tom's property watching the river, the place they had always gone when one of them needed to say something. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said. "You're going to, whether I say yes or not," Tom said. "What would you do if you had feelings for someone that were complicated?" Tom looked at him. "Complicated how?" "Just complicated." "Is she married?" "No." "Promised to someone?" "No." "Then what's complicated?" Jake looked at the river. "The situation," he said. Tom waited with the patience of a man who has known his friend for 10 years. "Who is she?" Tom said. "Nobody you know," Jake said, which was the single most dishonest thing he had ever said in 10 years of honest friendship. Tom looked at him with the expression of a man who is not entirely convinced, but has decided to file the information and return to it later. "Well," Tom said, "if she's not married and not promised to anyone, the only complicated thing is you. You always make things harder than they are." He threw a stone at the river. Jake threw one further. Tom threw a better one. They sat by the river for another hour, not talking about it, which was, Jake thought, both the best and the worst thing about having a best friend who knew you that well. He went back the following Saturday to chop the rest of the firewood. He told himself this was practical. The winter was coming. The wood needed splitting. Tom was at the mill Saturdays. It was the obvious and neighborly thing to do and had nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that he had thought about Rose Calloway's blue eyes approximately 400 times since Tuesday. He told himself this and did not believe a word of it, but went anyway. Rose answered the door with the expression of a woman who had been expecting someone else. "Tom's at the mill," she said. "I know," he said. "I came to finish the firewood." She looked at him. "Jake, you don't have to." "I know," he said. "Where's the axe?" She pointed to the barn. He split wood for 2 hours. Rose came out at noon with water and bread and sat on the porch step watching him with her arms crossed and that look she had, assessing, direct. The look that had terrified him at 12 and impressed him at 17 and was currently doing something to him he was not going to examine in daylight. "You're better at that than I am," she said. "Most people are," he said. "You were using the wrong angle." "I was using a perfectly adequate angle." "You were making it harder than it needed to be." She considered several responses. "Story of my life," she said, which she meant about the firewood. He heard something else entirely. He put the axe down and looked at her, and she looked at him. And for 4 seconds, neither of them said anything. And the Oregon morning held them in the silence of 2 people having 2 conversations at once. Then Rose stood up and said, "Lunch in 10 minutes if you want it." And he said, "Yes, ma'am," and followed her in. And if his heart was doing something unreasonable the whole time, he was doing an adequate job of not showing it. He thought, it was Martha Greer who nearly ruined everything. Martha ran the general store and had the comprehensive awareness of town business that comes from 30 years of selling people things and listening while they did it. Jake was at the store buying nails when Martha said, entirely conversationally, "You've been spending a lot of time at the Calloway house lately." Tom's my best friend, Jake said. Martha said. The specific that meant she had noticed something. The wood needed splitting, Jake said. Martha said again. Is there something you want to say, Mrs. Greer? Martha put his nails in a bag with the serenity of a woman who has made her point without making it. Rose Calloway is a fine woman, she said. That's all. Jake paid and left. He walked directly into Tom on the street outside. You look terrible, Tom said by way of greeting. I'm fine, Jake said. You look like a man who's done something he can't figure out how to undo. I haven't done anything. Tom looked at him with 10 years of knowing him. Yet, he said. Jake stopped. What does that mean? It means you look like a man thinking about doing something and trying to talk himself out of it. Tom adjusted his hat. What did Martha say? She said your mother is a fine woman, Jake said, because it was true, and because saying it out loud to Tom's face was the only way to see how it landed. Tom went very still. Then he looked at Jake with an expression Jake had never seen on him before. Not anger, not amusement, but something working through a calculation in real time. Tom said. One syllable. He picked up his package and kept walking. Jake stood on the street watching him go. Then Tom stopped at the corner and looked back. You coming? He said. To where? Jake said. To supper, Tom said. Mama made pot roast. And he walked on. Jake stood there for a moment. Then he followed. Because what else do you do when your best friend invites you to supper at his mother's house after you have just accidentally told him you have feelings for her? I want to stop here for just a moment. You know what gets me about Tom right here? He doesn't ask his friend to disappear. He doesn't get angry. He invites him to supper. That's a harder thing to do than it sounds, and it tells you everything about who Tom Calloway is. This story has found listeners in EUA, Nigeria, in India, in the Philippines, in Mexico, in South Africa. In places I never imagined when I first sat down to tell a Western story. Every single one of you found something in these characters worth listening to. What country are you listening from today? Drop it in the comments. Every country, every language, every corner of the world. Now let's get back, because supper at the Calloway house is about to be the most uncomfortable meal Jake Mercer has ever eaten.
Rose had made pot roast. It was, as always, excellent. Rose Calloway cooked the way she did everything, with complete competence and no interest in being praised for it. The pot roast sat in the center of the table the way it always did on Thursdays, and everything was exactly as it had always been. Except that Tom knew, or suspected, or was in the process of knowing. Jake wasn't sure which, and not knowing made it worse. They sat at the kitchen table, Tom at his usual place, Jake at his, Rose at hers, and had supper the way they had 100 times before. The only difference was that Jake was now acutely aware of every single thing he did. He passed the bread without being asked. He always passed the bread without being asked. It was automatic. Tom watched him pass the bread. Jake became suddenly uncertain whether passing the bread was something he had always done or something that now had meaning. He had passed this bread 100 times. He now could not determine if it was a normal thing to do. Good bread, he said. Rose looked at him. It's the same bread I always make. I know, he said. It's always good. Tom made a sound that was almost a cough. How's the mill? Jake said, because someone needed to say something. Fine, Tom said. How's the firewood? Split, Jake said. All of it? All of it. That's a lot of firewood, Tom said. It was a lot of logs, Jake said. Rose looked between them.
"Is something wrong with you two?" "No," they said, exactly simultaneously. Rose Calloway had raised Tom for 22 years and known Jake for 10 of them. She looked at them both with the expression of a woman who has identified the problem and is deciding how long to let them struggle with it. She picked up her fork. "Pass the potatoes, Jake," she said. He passed the potatoes.
Tom watched him pass the potatoes. Supper continued. It was, Jake thought, the longest meal of his entire life, and the pot roast was genuinely excellent, and he was going to remember this Thursday for the rest of his natural life.
Tom said it 2 days later, at the river, in the same place they always went when one of them needed to say something. He threw a stone first. It skipped 4 times. Then he sat on the rock and looked at the water. "So," he said. "So," Jake said. "My mother," Tom said. "Tom, let me finish." He threw another stone. "My mother," he said again. "You have feelings for my mother." Jake said nothing. There was nothing to say that would make this easier. Tom was quiet for a long time. "She's 40 years old," Tom said. "I know." "You're 22." "I know." "That's 18 years, Jake." "I know that too." Tom threw a stone that didn't skip at all, just hit the water and sank. He looked at it as if it had personally disappointed him. "You've been coming to our house since we were 12, he said. "She made you soup. She told you when you were being an idiot." "She's my mother." "I know," Jake said. "I know all of that. I'm not asking you to be comfortable with it. I'm not even sure I'm comfortable with it. I just couldn't keep lying to your face." Tom was quiet for a very long time. A hawk crossed the Oregon sky above them. And you know what? That right there is the moment that stays with me. Jake telling the truth when it would have been so much easier not to. That's what 10 years of real friendship looks like. Not comfortable, just honest. "Does she know?" Tom said finally. "No," Jake said. "Are you going to tell her?" Jake looked at the river. "I don't know." Tom picked up a stone and turned it in his hands. "She's been alone for 4 years, he said, more to the river than to Jake. "She does everything herself and never complains. And I know it's hard." "Does she know?" Tom said finally. "No," Jake said. "Are you going to tell her?" Jake looked at the river. "I don't know." Tom picked up a stone and turned it in his hands. "She's been alone for 4 years, he said, more to the river than to Jake. "She does everything herself and never complains. And I know it's hard." Jake looked at his best friend. "I won't," he said. It was the most important promise he had ever made. Tom nodded once. They sat by the river for another hour. Nobody said anything else. It was enough. Rose Calloway was not a woman who missed things. She had noticed in September when Jake came around the corner and stopped at the edge of the yard. She had noticed the way he looked at her before he looked away, the half-second that lasted too long. She had filed it the way she filed things that required thought and said nothing. She had noticed at supper, the bread, the potatoes, the way Tom had watched Jake watch her. She had said nothing then either. She was not saying nothing because she didn't know what to say. She was saying nothing because some things need to be left alone until they're ready to be handled. She had also, and this was the part she examined alone in the evenings, lying awake next to a cup of coffee she'd made and never drunk, noticed something else. She had noticed that when Jake was in the room, she sat differently. That she thought about what she said before she said it. That the Tuesday with the axe had been in her mind more than she was entirely comfortable admitting. She was 40 years old. He was 22. She had known him since he was a child, eating soup at her kitchen table. She listed these facts the way she balanced accounts. They did not add up. And yet, on a Thursday in November, she was carrying wood in from the pile, the wood Jake had split, when she heard him come through the back gate.
She did not turn around. "Tom's not here," she said. "I know," he said. He came and took the wood from her arms without asking. She let him. He carried it to the porch. They stood in the November afternoon looking at the mountains.
"Jake," she said, "whatever you're thinking." "I know," he said, which stopped her, because she had taught him that. The "I know," that means I am doing this anyway. She looked at him, at this young man who had been coming to her house for 10 years, who knew which step creaked and how she took her coffee and exactly when to say nothing. "I'm 18 years older than you," she said, and she heard herself almost say 22 before she got the number right. And she understood that even her own arithmetic was thrown off by whatever this was. He looked at her steadily. "I counted," he said. And they stood in the November afternoon, and she thought, well, that's that.
December arrived with rain and the closeness of an Oregon winter. Jake came by on Tuesdays now. Neither of them had established this formally. It had simply become true. He helped Rose repair a section of fence that had come down in the previous week's wind. They worked side by side with the comfortable efficiency of two people who have learned each other's pace.
Tom came by in the afternoon and found them on the porch with coffee afterward, sitting in the two chairs, not quite close enough that anything needed to be said, but close enough that Tom stood in the doorway for a moment, with the expression of a man who is actively working on his feelings about something.
"Coffee?" Rose said. "Sure," Tom said. He got a chair from inside and sat on the other side of his mother and drank his coffee and looked at the rain. The three of them sat on the porch and watched the rain come down on the Oregon Valley.
"Good fence work," Tom said eventually. "Jake fixed the post on the east side," Rose said. "It's been soft since August." Tom looked at Jake. Jake looked at the rain. Tom made a sound that was not quite agreement. "I've been thinking," Tom said, to nobody specifically, "about my father." Rose was very still. "He always said Jake was the most reliable person I knew," Tom said. "Said it when Jake was 15 and fixed the barn roof without being asked." He drank his coffee. "He said any man who fixes a thing without being asked is worth knowing." The rain came down. The mountains were invisible. Rose looked at her coffee cup, and Jake looked at the fence post he had fixed, and Tom looked at the rain, and the three of them sat on the porch in the silence of people who have said something real without using the real words. Nobody moved for a long time. It was enough for now. And they all understood that. It was March before she said it. March in Oregon, the rain letting up, the first green coming through, the mountains reappearing from cloud. Jake had been coming by Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tom had stopped making the face he made at first and had started including Jake in conversations about the property with the natural ease of a man who has made a decision and moved on. They were on the porch, just the two of them. Tom at the mill, watching the March light on the mountains, when Rose said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes," Jake said. She was quiet for a moment. "Why?" she said. "Of all the women in this county, women your age, women without a grown son who's your best friend, women without," she gestured at herself, at the gray beginning at her temples, at the 40 years of her. "Why?" He looked at her for a long time. "Because you're the most real person I know," he said. "You've been real since I was 12 years old. You told me the truth when I needed it. You asked me real questions and waited for real answers." He looked at the mountains. "I kept looking at women my age and thinking, Why doesn't talking to them feel like this? And I finally understood that the reason is because I've been comparing them to you, without knowing it, since I was 12. Rose looked at the mountains. "Jake," she said, "I'm 40 years old." "I know." "You're 22." "I know." She turned and looked at him with those blue eyes that had never told him anything but the truth. "Where were you 20 years ago?" she whispered. And then she laughed, the real laugh, the kind that arrives when something is both funny and true, and there is no better response. He looked at her and understood that she was laughing because the situation was genuinely absurd, and because she had just said something she had been thinking for months. 20 years ago, I was 2 years old, he said. "I know," she said, still laughing. "That's the problem." He looked at her. "Is it a problem?" he said. The laughter faded. She looked at him with the expression of a woman who has run the accounts and found they don't add up and has decided to stop caring whether they do. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I genuinely don't know." He nodded once. "That's enough for now," he said. And she looked at this young man who had learned "I know" from her and was now using it better than she did, and thought, yes, it is. Tom came to Jake at the river in April. He threw a stone first, 4 skips. Then he sat on the rock and looked at the water. "I've been thinking," Tom said. "About what?" Jake said. "About my father, about what he said, about reliable people." He threw another stone. "About my mother." He paused. "She's been different this winter. Better different. More present. Like something that had been off for 4 years got switched back on." Jake said nothing. "Is that you?" Tom said. Not accusing, just asking. "I don't know," Jake said. "Maybe." Tom nodded slowly. "I want to say something," Tom said. "And I want you to understand that it takes considerable effort, and I'd appreciate it if you didn't make it strange." "All right," Jake said. Tom was quiet for a moment. "My father was the best man I knew," he said. "And when he died, my mother kept going. She always keeps going. But something in her stopped. And I've been watching her for 4 years, wondering if it was ever going to start again." He picked up a stone. "I think it has." Jake looked at the river. "She deserves to be happy," Tom said. "That's what it comes down to. And I'm not going to be the reason she isn't." He looked at Jake directly. "Don't make it weird." "I'll try," Jake said. "You better do more than try. You're still my best friend, and if you make my life strange, I will never forgive you." "I know," Jake said. Tom stood and extended his hand. Jake shook it. It was not the handshake of 2 acquaintances. It was the handshake of 2 men who have known each other since they were 12 and have just navigated something that could have broken them and didn't. "Good," Tom said. He put his hat back on. "Now come to supper. Mama made chicken, and I'm not eating alone while you 2 make eyes at each other across the table." "We don't make eyes at each other," Jake said. Tom gave him the look he had been giving him for 10 years, the one that meant, "You absolute idiot." "You absolutely make eyes at each other," he said. "It's been happening since September. I noticed immediately. I want that on record." Jake laughed. Tom laughed. They walked back to the Calloway house together, the same way they had been walking places together since they were 12. And nothing had changed, and everything had changed. And it was, somehow, exactly right. It happened on a May evening. Tom had gone to town. The Oregon Spring was doing what Oregon Springs do. Everything green and alive, and the mountains clear. Rose and Jake were on the porch in the 2 chairs that had become their own over the winter, coffee going cold, watching the last of the evening light on the mountains. They had been sitting in comfortable silence for 20 minutes, the silence that doesn't need filling, the kind that is itself a form of conversation. Rose said, "Jake." He said. "I've been doing the arithmetic in my head so many times this winter, lying awake next to a cold cup of coffee I never drank." He waited. "It doesn't add up," she said. "You're 22 and I'm 40, and you're Tom's best friend, and there are approximately 40 reasons this doesn't make sense." "I know," he said. "I've been trying to find the reason that outweighs all the others," she said. "Did you find it?" She looked at the mountains. "I think so," she said. "What is it?" She turned and looked at him, the blue eyes, direct and honest, and entirely without pretense. "It's that I'm happy," she said. "When you're here, I'm happy in a way I forgot existed. And I'm 40 years old, and I've been practical my whole life, and I've run the accounts and made the sensible choice every single time. And I think—" She stopped. "I think I'm done being practical." Jake put down his coffee cup. He stood up and crossed the 2 feet between them and held out his hand. She looked at it. She took it. He pulled her gently to her feet, and she stood in front of him on the porch with the Oregon evening behind her and the mountains going gold. He kissed her, gently, the way you kiss someone for the first time when you have been thinking about it for months and you want to get it right. She kissed him back, not tentatively, not with hesitation, but with the complete conviction of a woman who has run the accounts and made her decision and is not going back on it. The Oregon evening held them on the porch, the mountains gold behind them, the spring air around them. And when they finally stepped back from each other, neither of them said anything, because there was nothing to say that would have been better than the silence. Then from down the road came the sound of Tom's horse. Rose stepped back 1 step and smoothed her dress. Jake picked up his coffee cup. By the time Tom came up the porch steps, they were looking at the mountains the way they always did. Tom looked at them, then at the mountains. He sat in the 3rd chair. "Good evening," he said. "Good evening," Rose said. "Good evening," Jake said. Tom made the sound that was not quite a cough. "Right," he said. He picked up his coffee. It was cold. He drank it anyway. They were married in September of 1885, in the Millfield Church on a Saturday, with the whole town present because that was the kind of town Millfield was. Tom stood beside Jake at the altar, not reluctantly, genuinely. He had spent 4 months arriving at genuinely, and he had done it by watching his mother the way he had never thought to watch her before, not as a mother, but as a person. He had watched her laugh more in the spring than she had in the 4 years since his father died. He had watched the light come back into her eyes. He had watched Jake with her, careful, honest, consistent, the same way Jake had always been with him, and had understood that his best friend loving his mother was not a loss. It was a gain of something he hadn't known he was missing. Rose came down the aisle in a deep blue dress, the color of the Oregon sky on a clear day. Jake stood at the altar and looked at her and forgot to breathe. Tom beside him said quietly, "Breathe, you idiot." Whew, Jake breathed. Jake said his vows the way he said everything that mattered, directly, without decoration, looking at Rose the whole time. Rose said hers looking at him, with the blue eyes that had never told him anything but the truth. When they walked back down the aisle together, Tom shook Jake's hand at the door, the same handshake as at the river, and said, "Welcome to the family. Officially." "I've been in your family since I was 12, Jake said. "That was different," Tom said. "How?" Tom considered this with great seriousness. "Before," he said, "you were the annoying one who ate all the bread. Now, you're my stepfather." Jake stared at him. Tom held the expression for 4 seconds before he broke. Jake started laughing at the same moment. Rose, 2 feet away talking to Martha Greer, turned and looked at them. 2 men, best friends, laughing in the doorway of the church on Jake's wedding day, and shook her head with the expression of a woman who has made her decision and is very clear about what she has gotten herself into. She had gotten herself into this, into a man who chopped her firewood and learned her silence and showed up on Tuesdays without being asked. Into a best friend for her son, who turned into something else without anyone planning it. That evening on the porch, the 3 of them, the chairs, the Oregon mountains doing what they always did, Tom said, "Dad would have liked this." Nobody spoke for a while. Then Jake said, "Tell me about him." And Tom told him, and Rose listened. And the Oregon evening held them all, and the mountains went gold and then dark, and the stars came out over Millfield. And it was, by every measure Rose Calloway had ever used, exactly right. Jake Mercer came around the corner of a house one Tuesday morning in September and saw something he hadn't expected to see. He had 40 good reasons to walk away. He counted 3 of them. Then he walked across the yard anyway. That's the whole story. A man who didn't walk away. A woman who finally stopped being practical. A son who loved his mother enough to want her to be happy, even when it was the complicated kind of happy. I think about Tom a lot, about what it cost him to sit by that river and say, "Don't hurt her," instead of "Stay away from her." That took a kind of love for his mother that is bigger than comfort, bigger than what made sense on paper. And I think about what that friendship is, Jake and Tom, and what it means that it survived this. Because it did survive. It more than survived. It became something larger than it was before, the way good things do when they're tested and hold. There's something I want to say about honesty, too. Jake told Tom the truth when it would have been so much easier not to. He didn't let 10 years of friendship become a reason to hide. He said the true thing and let Tom decide what to do with it. That's what real friendship looks like. Not comfortable, just honest. Say what you feel. Show up on Tuesdays. Fix the thing without being asked. And if your best friend falls in love with your mother, give it time. Sit by the river, and when you're ready, throw the stone that skips the farthest. Thank you for riding with me today. Wherever you are, I am grateful you were here. Until next time, keep riding.